All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our live stream series we're calling Meet a Scientist. My name's Steve Jones. We're coming to you live from the Youth BIOlab there at the Albertson Research Center at St. Boniface Hospital in Winnipeg, Manitoba. We're here on Treaty 1 territory and the homeland of the Métis Nation here on the banks of the Red River. In this weekly live stream, we're going to meet some people from around the research center so we can learn a little bit more about what they do. And most importantly, learn a little bit more about why they love what they do. Today, we're joined by two scientists. We've got Dr. Carla Taylor. There she is. You'll meet her live in just a second. She's got a whole bunch of titles. She's the team leader for the Canadian Centre for Agri-Food Research in Health and Medicine. We're just going to say CCARM from now on. She's also principal investigator in the Metabolic Nutrition Lab here at the Research Centre. She's also a professor in the Department of Food and Human Nutritional Sciences at the U of M and an adjunct professor in the Department of Physiology and Pathophysiology at the U of M. And along with her is Dr. Peter Zahradka. He's deputy team leader for CCARM, principal investigator in another lab here at the Research Center, Molecular Physiology. And he's also a professor in those departments with all those big long names, Physiology and Pathophysiology, and Foods and Human Nutritional Sciences at the U of M here in Winnipeg. So we'll go live here. There they are right there. Welcome, Peter and Carla. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to join us and share a little bit more about what you do. I went through all your titles there. There's a whole bunch of things, team leaders, professors, associate professor, all these different things. Can you tell us just a little bit more, Carla, like what is it you do? So when we say you're team leader for CCARM, but you're also a principal investigator, I mean, that means you're a scientist. What's the job?
Okay. Well, I guess I like figuring out what keeps us healthy. And my interest is about food and nutrition and what we can eat to make us healthy and to do the research on that to find out what's good for us.
Right. And I mean, most people here at the Research Center, like that's why we're here, is because we're interested in health. What makes CCARM special, Peter? Like what's, you two are kind of the leaders of our CCARM unit. You're the first two to join us from CCARM. We've had some people from our other divisions in neurodegenerative disorders and cardiovascular sciences. What makes CCARM special around here? What's it all about?
Well, CCARM is a very interesting group of scientists. They have disciplines from a variety of different areas. And the main area here is trying to understand how the foods that we eat, how they affect health. And so what that requires is, it depends on who you are, which lab you're in, but you might be working with problems of breathing. You might be having issues about heart. So all of the investigators in CCARM have a different area of expertise in which they're doing. And the main part here is, are they providing you with some interesting plant material? Are they cooking it up into different food types to see whether they work for you or not?
Sure, because when I see kids in here, I always talk about the things that we do here in the Research Center. I always say, like, we've all learned since kindergarten that you're supposed to eat healthy foods to stay healthy, right? Like we all know this. And when I think of CCARM, I kind of think, it's really getting at the why are foods healthy and how are they healthy for us, and really what's in foods. One of the examples I use with, even when grade 5s come in here, as we say, I could say to a grade 5, what should you eat that's good for your bones, right? And I'm sure they would all know, oh, milk and dairy products, right? Maybe they've heard that before. But a scientist wants to know, okay, well, what is it in the milk and dairy products that's good for your bones and your teeth? And then we know, oh, it's calcium. Like there's things in our foods that are super good for us. And that's a big part of what CCARM tries to do is understand what's in those foods and how do they work for our body. Is that kind of right, Carla?
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. And we also have, I guess, that word agri-food in our title. So we're also interested in what is it that we grow here? What do our farmers grow? What we can grow in fields, so those crops. And so one of the things that Peter and I have been working on is beans and lentils. And maybe we can talk about those a little bit later. But we also have a couple of researchers who are looking at different berries and berries that are growing here in Manitoba as well, right? And I think what we're trying to get at is, I mean, we can find lots of claims about what certain foods or certain things, certain diets do, but we really want to have the scientific evidence to say, yes, if we consume a certain amount of, this item or this nutrient or this bioactive compound on a regular basis, that really is going to help our blood vessels, as an example.
Sure. I think that's a big part of all the work we do here is trying to share with people the things that we learn. And if you can walk into the grocery store or something and see something on the shelf that actually says, hey, this is really good for your heart or good for your brain or good for your arteries and your veins, that's proven by a lab that we can show in our labs, then maybe it helps people when they're making food choices for their families or making food choices for themselves. So maybe just a little broader before we get into some of the work that you two have done with beans and pulses and things like that. Like on a broader sense for CCARM, what are some of the foods people are interested in, Peter? Like, there's a pretty, we've said berries and beans and stuff. Are there others that we're interested in?
Oh, definitely. As Carla said, there are fruits, but there are also native fruits and fruits that you don't actually grow on a farm, but that you can go out into the bush and pick. And for our First Nations, some of those berries are very important for them. And we're talking about lingonberries and blueberries and such like that you can get in the wild. We're looking at things such as buckwheat, other types of grains, wheat, barley. There are some interest in various types of rice, especially wild rice, which again is something that can be harvested from the wild here. And you've mentioned the pulses, and I don't know if everybody knows what a pulse is. And those are the seeds of legumes. So beans, peas, lentils, chickpeas are the common ones that are grown in the Canadian West. And those are major crops that are eaten around the world.
Sure. And make up a big part of people's diets. I think that's a really important thing to note too, is like people have known that foods have medicinal properties for thousands of years, right? People have used the things that grow all over the place here in Manitoba for thousands and thousands of years, knowing that they're good for treating all kinds of diseases. And it's neat that we have a part in that too. Just asking like, why? What's in those foods that really does the things, amazing things for our body? And we thought we'd share with people watching today a little bit of kind of the research that you do and break it down a little for people. This is one that I find really interesting. And I'll just jump ahead. I think I'll show a picture of your team here, because I always, when we have people in, and hopefully we're going to have lots more people in from CCARM over the year here, when we have people in, it's not just you and Carla doing the work here. All these things are part of a big team. And I know you two, even though you run two different labs, have always worked together as a team here in the building. I pulled a picture that I think I can share with folks out there. Maybe not. I think this is from a couple of years ago. We'll share this one of I think it's from a few years ago of the team here. You can see Peter Carla back in the olden days when we could all get close together without wearing masks. But I brought this one up just to highlight Jamie there, who's third from the right, because we're going to share a little bit of the work that Jamie did. Was this part of her PhD project? I think this beans paper.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So Jamie's did her PhD under both of you, like was a joint kind of thing together in both labs. Yep. And and we thought we need to share some of her work because it's, I find it really interesting because it really relates to things that that we might eat on a daily basis and that viewers out there might be familiar with. So I just wanted to give Jamie some notes, and that, you know, other folks, none of these things that we put out of our labs are just the work of one individual scientist or one individual person. There's always so many people involved, and probably even beyond the folks in this picture here. So let me pull it up. Here's kind of the big sciencey, you know, that black beans and red kidney beans induce a positive postprandial vascular responses in healthy adults. A pilot randomized crossover study. I threw up some pictures there. There's some, you know, kidney beans and black beans, which people are probably familiar with. This one I like. It's actually kind of funny that I'm doing this today because I took a picture of my lunch. There's my lunch, and there's some black beans and some kidney beans. You know, this is something that I eat on a regular basis, and part of that is because I've walked around CCARM and seen all the posters and seen all the things you guys talk about, and how important that is for our lives. So, can you break this down a little bit when we talk about positive postprandial vascular responses? Does this mean it's a healthy thing, or what are we saying here?
Yes.
Go ahead, Carla.
I'll start.
Sure.
Bottom line, yes. and you'll find out as we talk about this study, yeah, it takes different kinds of expertise to do this type of work. And as scientists, Peter and I bring different expertise to this as well, because I think about this more from the food perspective, and he thinks about it more from the blood vessels. And by putting that together, we can design a really good study and consider all the different factors. And so I guess as an introduction to this, there's previous research out there showing that if we eat foods that are, say, high in fat, maybe like a fast food meal, we find that in the 2, 3, 4 hours after that meal, our blood vessels actually become more constricted. And long term, if that repeatedly keeps happening day after day, that's not a good thing. But we've taken it, so we're looking at, so what are some of the good foods that we could be consuming that would actually help our blood vessels after we eat.
So when we say blood vessels and constricted, like really what we're talking about is, you know, people have probably heard arteries and veins, and we kind of use the word blood vessels to talk about all of those tubes that move blood around your body, right? Arteries I'll just bring out my little hose here, but the idea being, you know, your heart's pumping blood out through this tube, and it's taking blood up to your brain, or it's taking blood to your kidneys, or it's taking blood to your arm muscles, or it's taking blood to the heart itself. And when we say these things get constricted, like they can actually open, there's a little bit of muscle in there that they can actually open and close to kind of control how much blood is getting where it needs to go. Am I on the right track there?
Yes, you are. The important part to realize is blood vessels have to be flexible, because unlike a lot of things, pipes in your house, for example, with water, the water flows continuously. Okay.
Sure.
In your body, the blood flows in spurts. Every time your heart beats, it pushes out about 100 milliliters of blood, depending, a little bit less for some people, depending on size. And that whole amount has to go into your aorta, which is the big vessel that extends right down the front of your, well, it's not the back, but the front of your body, down towards the legs.
Yeah, it's that big one that would be coming right out of your heart and then branches out all over the place. Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And so to be able to hold that amount of blood, it actually has to expand quite a bit. And then it slowly decreases again. And that helps push the blood to the various places in the body. Okay, so not only is it the heart pumping, but blood vessels also help to pump too.
Right, and so we want them really stretchy to be able to handle those changes in blood flow. That's
right. One of the things is, as you were talking, if its vessel is constricted or stiffer, and that can happen as you age, and that's called atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries. The pressure of the blood against that wall of the blood vessel actually can shoot up higher than what the blood vessel really likes.
Okay.
And so what Carla didn't mention is after eating those 2 hours, that's the postprandial period. Okay, so immediately after you've eaten for a few hours.
So that's what that word means in the title, is just after eating, right? If we simplified it, would just be after eating, what happens to those blood vessels, those arteries and those.
That's right.
Yeah.
And if it stiffens, you're increasing blood pressure. You're increasing the pressure against the wall. And that actually, just like if you pinch somebody, it hurts the tissues.
Sure.
And the tissues react. And if it happens over and over and over again, the blood vessels adapt. They become tougher and stiffer, and the pressure still keeps rising. And that's where you get the buildup over years that you start getting disease in the blood vessels.
And so, Carla, you said that the things we eat almost immediately, like in that postprandial, like after eating, depending on what you're eating, that can actually change how flexible how soft and flexible those vessels are. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So the food that we eat that comes into our body, right? We digest it, and we absorb it. We get those compounds coming into our blood. They're directly affecting our blood vessels.
And different things that we eat can have different effects. And so is that kind of what this study is getting at, is trying to understand why if I eat, a Big Mac and fries instead of my bean chili lunch, that there's some difference in how my arteries are going to respond to that?
Yeah, exactly. So what we eat makes a difference. And then the other part of that title was about dark colored beans. So we found that the black beans and the red kidney beans, they were good for having positive effects, and more so than a bean that was a lighter color.
Interesting. And I guess the next question always for scientists is like, well, why is that? Like, I had pinto beans in my lunch as well. There was black beans in there and kidney beans in there and pinto beans in there, which are kind of the lighter colored beans, the pinto ones. But so there's a difference in the actual beans you eat.
Yeah, and that's what Jamie was also looking at, was because the beans have different coat colors, so it's the hulls around them that determine the color. Inside tends to be starchy. Okay, but the coat color is where there are thousands of different chemicals. I mean, literally thousands.
And I think maybe people don't realize that it's the chemicals in those things. It's the chemicals in those skins that actually give them their color. So that's almost a way we can tell what's going on in there.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
And so what did Jamie look at, Peter? Sorry, I interrupted.
Well, all we can say is that there's lots of she was assuming that the darker colored beans would be better for you because it had more of these chemicals, which is not the case. Okay, the pinto beans, the navy beans, has many different chemicals, but they're still different from what the dark colored beans have. And it's the chemistry of those compounds that is also different. And so what we're trying to say is probably the chemistry about the compounds in the dark colored beans, which are different from those in the light colored beans, may be more beneficial for you.
Interesting. So just maybe we'll break it down a little bit before we wrap up here. So can you tell me, Carla, how did she actually go about this? So, scientists, we're always trying to measure things and observe things. And, if you were going to set up a study, how do you actually figure it out that this bean is different than this bean and this bean is different than this bean? Did we actually feed it to people? Is that what happened here? And then what did did she measure down the road to actually show that something was changing?
Yeah, okay. That's right. Right. So this is what we also call like a clinical study, where we have to recruit people in to be participants in our study. And in this one, we wanted people who were healthy. And when we did our study visits, they came in on actually 5 different days, because we also compared the beans to just rice. And so the night before, people would have to start fasting, so not eat any food or have any beverage except water from the night before till they came in the morning. And we would get some measurements when they came in. And then we had this sample a certain amount of cooked beans they had to consume. So one day they came in, they got black beans. Another day they got the navy beans. And before they ate the beans and after, we could do a measurement to see how elastic their blood vessels are. And we have an instrument which is essentially like getting your blood pressure taken. So there's like a cuff on your arm, and then it can sense, in addition to changes in blood pressure, it can sense some other things about how those vessels are responding.
And I think most, like if people are, if kids are watching, like they've probably been to the doctor and had that blood pressure measurement taken where they put the cuff around your arm and they squeezes really tight. But really what it's doing is squeezing those tubes, those vessels in your arm. And then you can kind of measure things like how that pressure, how hard that blood is pressing against those arteries, or how fast it's flowing, or, you know, pulse rates and all those sort of things. There's a lot you can measure about those arteries without having to go inside the body, just by blood pressure, right? So that's similar to what she did?
Yes. Yeah.
And what did she end up finding at the end? Like what were the actual results when we started doing those tests?
Okay. Are you going to take this,
Peter?
Okay, sure. So what she found was that if you looked simply at the elasticity of the blood vessels, that the red kidney and the black beans made the vessels more elastic, more flexible, compared to the white beans, compared to the rice that was the control. In this study, we did not try anything different, like doing a high-fat meal or anything like that. That there's enough information out there to say that that would decrease the flexibility already. And this was the very first study to actually examine whether these kinds of plant materials, when you eat them, would have an effect in the period immediately after you ate. There have been studies done before looking at flexibility if you've been eating them for several months.
Interesting. So, I mean, those are always the questions that come out of a study like this, right? Is, okay, well, what's next? Where do we go from here? And, you know, there's a lot of interesting things came out of it. That would have been my question is, you know, so there's an effect after. What are the effects over a long period? Like if I eat beans every week or every day for lunch, is that something over a long term that you think has really good effects for my heart? Is that something that could have effects elsewhere in my body too? Or what's the next step? Where would you go from here?
Well, we already did that. That was done almost 10 years ago. Oh. We did that too. We were the first to show that if you eat these foods for a long term, you get better blood flow. And we did this in people who had a disease called peripheral artery disease, in which they have blockages that prevent blood to flow into their legs.
Oh, and it just improves that, and it'll improve that flow over time too. That's really interesting. Were there, like, what would be the next step from a study like this? More people, different beans? Is there, like, where does it go from here? Because this is just very recent. I'm just looking, this is from this year it was published. What's the next step? Where do you go from here? Carla?
Okay. Well, I think this is where we've got lots of ideas, right? And
Yeah,
lots of questions, right? And so I think one of them Peter's talked about a little bit because, right, it's not typical that we just eat beans alone, right? When
right.
I look at your lunch, right, it's mixed in with some other foods. And so the idea is if we're consuming a combination of foods and, maybe with some foods that have, some more fat and some
Mhm.
other things that may not be so good, can the beans kind of overcome some of the effects of those foods that might not be so good for us, right?
And
So
that's always one of the tricks when you're doing foods research, I imagine, too, is people have to want to eat it at this, right? It just can't. We all know beans have some, adverse physiological effects on someone's gastrointestinal system sometimes, and some people might not might say, oh, I don't really want to eat beans for that reason. But there's lots of different ways you can prepare these things. But you're right, nobody's just eating raw or just cooked beans. There's lots of different ways. When you're doing foods research, you probably have to think of what'll people actually eat, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. And then I think another thing we want to start figuring out, like what is it about those compounds that are different in black beans and red kidney beans compared to the other beans, right?
Sure.
Because maybe we can learn more about those and their effects in the body.
Very cool. Well, I think we can wrap it up there. I like anything else to add there, Peter? Like, I find these studies really interesting. I've spent a lot of time wandering around the CCARM floor and checking out the work done by students in all the different labs there. And like, I know I've added some of those things. I eat a lot of lentils and I eat a lot of the beans and things that come up in your studies because I find them delicious. And if they have some actual good benefits for my body, I think that's a really interesting way to go about your health, where you can actually see, hey, this has a really neat effect on my arteries or good effects for my hearts. Are there other diseases that you think these things can maybe, or other effects you think that beans can have in the body, Peter?
There probably are. Have we explored all of them? No, we haven't. Well, one of the things that we think will be good is for possibly our fat tissue and our muscles. So we're starting to explore the effects of beans and related plants on those organs, because one of the most important things today is obesity. And if you can figure out a better way of controlling fat management and converting fat into muscle, that'd be healthier for you too.
Very cool. And I think that's a big part of the fun of being a scientist. And it's a big part of the fun of the job is that, there's so much more to learn, right? Like there's so many more steps to go next, and there's so many more things to explore. And especially just as Carla started it all off, we're all interested in health and how health works, and just being curious about the things that we eat. We all have to do it every day. If we can learn more about how that really affects our body and changes things on the inside, I think that's incredible work that the two of you do, and it's really relatable to a lot of the people who might be watching today. So I'll thank you there for your time today. I'll encourage you to tell Jamie to get down here, or anyone from your labs to come on down and chat a little bit about the work that they do. We'd love to see some more people from CCARM come down and share, because it's always really interesting, and it's always something that viewers and students out there can relate to, because we all got to eat, and we're all curious about how our bodies work. So I will thank you there for your time. I really appreciate it. Thanks very much, and we'll sign off.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So thanks to Peter and Carla for joining us today from CCARM at St. Boniface Hospital Research. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and on Twitter. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, and you can check out activities and all kinds of things on youthbiolab.ca. Thanks so much for everyone for joining us. We'll see you next Thursday. Hopefully we should have some friends from the Division of Neurodegenerative Disorders joining us. Thanks very much, Peter and Carla. Have a good day.